when you dare to take a breath. Don't care about no medals on your chest. You're a steely-eyed killer shadow in the night. You were born to fight. You gotta light 'em up.
Welcome to Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine from Green Zone Hero. We're proudly American, unapologetically patriotic, and politically incorrect. We are the voice, the platform for transitioning veterans, honoring their stories and wisdom.
Save us all before they burn it down.
Welcome to Straight Outta Combat. I'm John Krotek, Army veteran.
And I'm Chris Hager, Gold Star father.
Our combat veteran for this episode is Jason Johns. Jason served in the Wisconsin National Guard and in the Army Reserves, was a member of the 229th Combat Support Engineers from 1994 to 2002. In 2003, he left civilian life as an attorney and re-enlisted to join his unit for Operation Iraqi Freedom, returning back home to the United States of America in 2004. Jason is very active in veteran benefits law and is a huge advocate representing his brothers and sisters with their appeals in front of the VA's Board of Veterans Appeals. I know he's where his heart and his soul is. I met Jason up in Saskatchewan this past late summer, and he is all about veterans and helping veterans get what they need. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you on the radio with us, Jason. This is Chris.
Yeah, you too, Chris. Thank you, and thank you for your family sacrifice.
I appreciate it. The connections that have led me to spend and get to know veterans really has enriched my life, and I really do appreciate the time that you give us in this kind of a format.
Well, before we came on, these guys were smoking and joking about all of these crazy names in the state of Wisconsin, and I know how Jason is a huge Badgers fan, but, Jason, tell us about what was it like growing up? And are you a Wisconsin guy originally or from somewhere else?
I am, you bet.
Tell us about that.
I grew up in a small town about in the southwest corner of the state along the Mississippi River, just this side of Dubuque, Iowa. I had a graduating class of 53 people. Lived in the town of Lewisburg, but was so small we had a Hazel Green mailing address, a Fairplay phone number, and a Cuba City phone number as well. So very rural area, but always grew up knowing I figured someday I'd be involved in the military. Had a father who served as well as uncle.
Those guys were in the Army?
My uncle actually retired as Command Sergeant Major from the Corps, and my dad was in the Army, yes.
When you say small towns with 54, I have to laugh. I grew up in the middle of Kansas.
Yeah.
The telephone number that I remember was 3.
That's crazy. I mean, like 54 people. I mean, one CVS, there's 54 employees.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We had 350 kids in my school in 12 grades. So we were a little smaller than you.
Yep.
So I know, if you haven't met Jason, he's a towering guy. And were you playing basketball and things like that in high school?
I was actually very involved in, not basketball. I was a football. I wrestled, had track and baseball, and then also found myself involved in some school musicals as well. I don't still have that voice, but back then in a small school, I guess I was good enough. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So when you got out of high school, you went right away to college, or you went into the service, or how did all that work?
Yeah, so I was I knew I was fortunate, even in high school, to know that I wanted to not only serve in the military in some capacity, but also go to law school. And I spoke with a recruiter at that time, and it was right around that time, the Army, I had kind of planned on, I spoke with him, I should back up. As freshman year, I spoke with the recruiter with my mom and was told that if I enlisted in the Army afterwards, after graduation, signed up for the JAG Corps, they would help pay for undergrad and then law school, and then, of course, get commissioned and go 6 years active duty. Well, between freshman year and senior year, I don't know if you remember that show Jag that was on CBS.
I do, yeah.
Yep, which obviously is not very realistic to what
You thought
Jag
that it was,
officers
though.
actually do.
Yeah.
Between the freshman and senior year, they had that show made it so popular to be JAG that the Army had a huge influx of people signing up for the JAG Corps, including already practicing attorneys.
So they didn't need you.
Yep. So they didn't need to use the kind of incentives, if you will, to recruit people in there.
Right.
And after speaking with him, I knew I didn't want to go active duty for 4 years and then go to school for 7 years. So the next best option, I was the oldest of 5 kids, needed some help with paying for college, was the Wisconsin Army National Guard. Would allow me to, of course, go to basic and AIT, but then to drill while I'm going to school. And back at that time, that was 1994, they offered 50% tuition assistance for undergraduate. So that's the way I went. For the next 7 years, I was with different Guard units throughout school as well as the Reserve unit, and completed that service in 2002.
What was basic like for you? Because combat engineers, but how much of a transition of that was for you?
Honestly, for any kid, I think in that situation they find themselves, whether they're from urban or rural, it's obviously a whole new experience, right? I was fortunate. I had a lot of discipline through my sports, a lot of, group calisthenics, PT, so on and so forth. But also my Guard unit had what was called kind of a pre-training. So I was drilling with my unit for 9 months before I ever left for basic. And we even did a 2-day program up at Camp Douglas, which was almost like a mini basic. For 2 days straight, we were smoked and ran drills and DNC and so on and so forth. So I kind of had a little leg up when I got to basic in Fort Leonard Wood, which I guess good or bad, within a week, I found myself as platoon guide wearing those crazy stripes on the arm. So
I get it, man. So you're that guy they were like earmarked. There's the guy we want right there. And if everybody messes up, you mess up. Something like that.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I learned that real fast.
So you were at Leonard Wood, and then where was the engineer school at? Same place?
Also there at Leonard Wood. Mm-hmm.
So then you came back to Wisconsin. You're doing your thing. You served in the reserves for several years, and then you got out.
Yeah, actually, after college at University of Northern Iowa, I went up to law school in Minneapolis. And after that, when my service wrapped up, I had gone out to Washington, D.C., was working out there. And believe it or not, I moved out there 2 weeks before 9/11 in August of 2001 and was living in Arlington. I was IRR at the time of the attack and found myself with an MP unit out of Fort Belvoir doing street security for the next 2 weeks after 9/11. So it was a very kind of forming. I mean, obviously, like most U.S. citizens, including military, I was pretty pissed off at the time, right? I mean, I sat there and I hopped on my motorcycle, went up to the top of the hill there where the Air Force Memorial is now, and saw the Pentagon burning, the rescue efforts going on, tried to help, but I wasn't in uniform. And of course it was chaos. So, but that forever was ingrained in my mind. It was not too long later, a year later, I found myself saying, it's time to go do something about it.
Yeah. And so what'd you do? You re-enlisted?
Yeah. So I had returned. I left D.C. in December of 2002 to come back to Madison. I accepted a position in the Wisconsin legislature here, working as a legislative aide for a state legislator. And then in February, it came across my desk that my old unit, 229th, had been mobilized for active duty. That was on a Wednesday morning, February 3rd, 2003. I got on the phone immediately with the first sergeant, who was my platoon sergeant when I was with the unit. And he said, hell yeah, we could use you. I need a team leader. And believe it or not, by that afternoon, I was packing up my stuff at the office. My dad and brother came up and helped me pack my apartment. And then that night, I was over at the recruiting station doing all the paperwork. As a prior enlisted, I had to go through all that again.
Right.
Till midnight. Next morning, I found myself down at MEPS in Milwaukee at 05. I walked in, and the adjutant general for the state had said, expedite this guy. So I was done with MEPS by 10.
Right. Things are moving along quick. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Moved fast. And within 2 days, I was up at Fort McCoy with my unit doing mobilization training.
Wow. That's pretty darn quick. And then how long were you guys trained up before you went over?
We were there for 2.5 months, almost 3 actually. Everything was real quick pace at first, and we were supposed to go in with the 3rd Armored through Turkey. And of course, if you remember when Turkey shut down, said no to that, then the 101st kind of took over that AO. We sat there kind of in limbo, and then we're picked up by the 4th Infantry Division.
Steadfast and loyal.
Yeah, you got it.
What rank were you then?
E5, sorry.
E5.
So
my son was an Army Ranger. He had, in 2003 or so, he was already at the 6th RTB, but had known from, for 3 years they were just trying to figure out what he was going to do, and they kept keeping him as a Ranger instructor, and he kept saying, "I got to go deploy," and they said no. Finally he did figure out how to get a deployment, but he had to write his own transfer. But the Army was different for everybody that was in it, wasn't it? I mean, 9/11 changed everything. It truly did.
Well, definitely a turning point for a lot of people's lives. And tell us about Tikrit. That's where you were home, or you don't want to say home base, but that was where your main base was at when you got to Iraq.
That's correct. We moved up into Tikrit in early June of 2003. We moved into old Iraqi Air Force base about 8 clicks outside of the city, and we were the first kind of permanent unit in there, if you will. The old barracks were, a lot of the roofs were collapsed from bombing. The runways had strategically been bombed in the middle, but overall there was, it was out in the middle, right in the desert, not much there. And but there was still, the terminals were still there, as well as some kind of skeletal structures of buildings. So we got to cleaning up, moved in our cots into some of those buildings. 4th Aviation, because the 4th ID higher brass took over the palace in Tikrit, Saddam's palace, and 4th Aviation was stationed there at what became known as Camp Spiker.
Did you get a chance to go in? Did you get into the palace at all?
Oh, you bet. That's one of the things too. I always, I talk about. It was so surreal. It was being the small town Wisconsin boy, and being in there, swam in his pool one day, even took a shit in one of his shitters just to say I did.
Love it, man. Love it.
What's that?
I love that. Yeah,
I know. I had to just get that in there. But waking up one morning, we'd stayed there overnight in one of his guest palaces. So I'm familiar with it, but to describe it to the listeners, so there's this huge palace complex, walled, right in the city, but it's up on the bluffs. So the Tigris River is running down below, and down on the islands on the water, you had various guest palaces up on top of the bluffs. He had his main palace, he had his eating palace, he had his fitness palace, so on and so forth. Meanwhile, of course, all this poverty outside the walls.
Yeah.
But we had stayed at the guest palace one night, and it was, you could see where the nice little hole from the Tomahawk came in the top, did its thing inside, but the overall structure was still intact. But I woke up on the balcony at sunrise, and had sleeping outside, of course. It was hot as hell. And it just hit me that here I was in the cradle of civilization in Saddam Hussein's palace, and being again from a small town guy from Wisconsin, it really it was a surreal feeling.
Gosh, man, it must have been.
I have the strangest question. The Tigris is a big river. I mean, it obviously flows. What temperature is the water? Does the desert warm that water up, or does it come down enough from the mountains that it stays pretty cold?
It's not cold, but it's not piss warm either.
Kind of lukewarm, really.
Yeah, it's about lukewarm. You didn't want to swim in it much, obviously, because
what the hell was floating?
A lot of pollution and sewage control going in there. Yeah. But you notice too, a lot of the fish coming out of there that were in the marketplaces, mostly carp and other things. So
I always wondered. I mean, it's obviously 120 degrees out, but the water is.
Right.
Now you want me wanting to go for a swim. I mean, I'm thinking.
Oh yeah.
Water's pretty nice out there.
But you didn't know if you'd come out glowing or smelling like a commode. So
yeah.
So here you are. You're this Wisconsin boy, sleeping, hanging out on Saddam's balcony, took a dump in his palace. What kind of missions are you guys doing? It couldn't have been all hunky-dory like that.
No. And again, that wasn't the usual. We had the base camp, but we would go into, this is before, this was still, you were lucky to get a sat phone every couple of weeks for 15 minutes to call home.
Yeah.
AT&T hadn't gotten around to setting up all the tents yet. So they, especially at the FOBs. So we would go into the palace as we could, and we'd have to convoy. We have to do a full-on security convoy just to go in to make a phone call at the phone tents. And the reason we stayed overnight that one night at the guest palace was we had a lot of mortars coming in. The situation wasn't secure enough to convoy back, so we stayed there that night. But typically, if we weren't at base camp, we'd be back for a week or two at base camp, and then we'd be out fobbing for a week or two. And a lot of our mission was force protection. And so we found ourselves a lot of different FOBs helping build up force protection, police stations in not only Tikrit, but Samarra, Balad, Baqubah. And then we worked a lot with the infantry companies we supported and their platoons. So we'd find ourselves fobbing with them. And in fact, it was kind of all hands on deck at that time as well. So we would backfill with the infantry guys a lot too, and cover their checkpoints if they had to go on any knockdown missions.
Was there a lot of resistance there at the very beginning once the invasion took place and you guys were embedded basically? Was there resistance going on? What was happening?
It was relatively quiet that summer of 2003. I think the population was pretty glad we were there. A lot of thumbs up, a lot of waving, a lot of smiles going on, working with Iraqi police. It kind of turned late that summer when the Iraqi army was disbanded, and you had a lot of people that were out of work now, couldn't provide for their families. I think the enemy saw that as an opportunity, and it was right about Ramadan, October of 2003, when things started heating up. The IEDs were just coming around, but they were very, not archaic, but your definite command detonated phone call, cell phone type things. That's when things started turning a bit.
And you can understand why people would start doing that, especially if they were desperate and had to feed their families, and then they're sitting around, well, what can we do now?
Exactly. I try not to get into, the old Shakespeare. It's, ours not to question why, ours is what to do or die.
Right.
But, being for lack of a better term, as my commander would call me, one of his more educated grunts, and I'd also studied public international law when I was in law school. And so I'd often find myself talking with him and answering questions about Geneva and about laws of war and so on and so forth. But I really, I still believe in the why. I think we definitely, had to be done.
Yeah.
That guy's gone. The how got pretty fucked up. And the first kind of start of that was telling these, literally dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of guys, hey, you know what? Instead of getting a paycheck to support your family and fight with us, since you were, quote unquote, part of the Iraq army or a member of the Ba'ath Party, bye-bye. And so just, it's the utter basics of you're going to provide for your family and do what you got to do. And that, not only that didn't just apply to the military. If you were the head of public works in Baghdad and now you're told, well, you were a member of the Ba'ath Party, well, guess what? Everybody was. You had to be, or else you got shot or disappeared or otherwise. So
yeah, you weren't the inner circle just because you were in the party. And that should have been obvious, and it wasn't.
And throw in tribal law with that, and you got a cesspool for major confusion. Yeah. So
absolutely.
So I know you're a Purple Heart recipient, and thank God you're still here with us today, because you're just fun to be around. But you are smart. What was that like? Tell us about how you got that medal.
Yeah. So it's both frustrating because it was one of the scariest days of my life, but also, we look back at it and think it could have been prevented. So on, how that goes. You don't want to question it. But we were actually at a FOB just north of Samarra, and it was an old Iraqi government building. We were there with one of the infantry platoons, and we were basically just there to support them. a couple of squads from my platoon got attached to them, and they were running night missions, but also were responsible for a roadside checkpoint about a click north about where we were fobbed off of Highway 1. And they asked us to cover this checkpoint for a few days. They were getting ready to, the 4th was getting ready to launch a big operation in Samarra, kind of go house to house in December. So this is October 20th, early 20th of October 03. So of course, we manned the checkpoint. And the first couple days, we definitely noticed, some probing going on, the little Toyotas coming up, giving us the evil fuck you eye, turning around, rolling away. And we were asking for more support for night security on the site, but never got any. And somewhere that week, the enemy got in there overnight, planted a couple of anti-tank landmines. And when we rolled in the next morning, boom, boom. I was fortunate. I was very fortunate. I kept all my pieces, but I was knocked out. Back got twisted up, lost a hearing, took some shrapnel. I went to a field hospital, convalesced there, and was able to return to duty in a couple of weeks. But I definitely was in a lot of pain that had to be sucked up for the remainder of our tour.
Yeah.
But very, very fortunate. Another buddy really got his foot mangled up, a lot of other bumps and bruises. So we were fortunate.
Well, like I said, glad you're still here with us. So, you're back to duty again, and you were there how much longer before you came back to the States?
We were there, that would have happened 26 October, and then we returned in April of 04.
Came back home and didn't think about re-enlisting, but, did you stay in, or what happened?
So when I had voluntarily re-enlisted in Feb 03, and up until that point, it made sense. They didn't expect us to be over there very long. Let's put it that way. And so my initial my new contract was only for 1 year. Technically, when I was still in country, my contract was up, but obviously I wasn't asking to go home, leave my guys. So when we returned, there was stop loss till September, and then I got my second honorable discharge, if you will, in September of 04. I did decide, after speaking with some folks, to get going on my career again. And shortly thereafter, met my now wife and began the family and the career. And no, I never did get back into military service. Not a day went by, though. I'll tell you, there was, especially during the surge in 06, where it crossed my mind. It definitely crossed my mind. And I remember my wife saying, well, here's the deal. When you volunteered the first time, it was just you. Now it's me. We're getting ready to plan a family. You'd be choosing to leave us. And Jay, you've already done your part, and you bled for it. So, if you want to continue to serve, find some other way. And that's when I really got into the legislative side of things and advocacy and legal advocacy for veterans.
That's a good transition for sure. Obviously you're wounded in combat. Did you have, on the business side of things, seems like you're doing good, but was there anything that you experienced, like so many others are experienced with, PTS or any kind of TBI or?
Yeah, I've got minor residue from the TBI. Short-term memory loss is something that I deal with. Thank goodness. Well, I should say thank God. It's not, you tell me something important and I immediately forget it. I got to write stuff down, or now with the phones, I'll put something in there if it's something I definitely need to remember. As far as PTS, it was, I don't want to say it was delayed. Everybody's kind of different. It seemed like that first year back, you were so busy, you were so happy to be home, you're getting into things, you're doing this, you're doing that. And then it seemed to set in more as the war was continuing on. And I'd start thinking about guys over there we lost, other guys that got wounded, meeting other veterans through the events and organizations I was involved in. And I got angry. I didn't get, thank goodness again, I didn't have a whole lot of nightmares. And your typical, I didn't become inward as far as not wanting to leave the house or anything like that. But I was angry. Various triggers, including music, driving in certain situations, crowds. But, one of the things, though, is, and then I turned to drinking. I'm not too humble to say there was a lot of drinking going on, and not to the point of, such abusive that it, it needed help as far as the substance, but just more than I cared to. And it was affecting my wife, beginning to affect our kids. We had our first, we had twin girls in 2009. And so there was that period from kind of 2006 to 2010 where it was always underneath the surface, if you will. I was very functioning, working through my career, being successful, but it was always kind of there. And it was after an incident in 2010 when I got involved in some things and got into a fight and so on and so forth. I won't go into all those details.
Well, we have similar stories, we talked about. In fact, you called me. You remember? You called me before we went to Canada, and you gave me some really great advice.
Yeah, I look back at that, and it was at that time that, a good friend of mine, Marine Corps vet, he had lost his leg, and he was real involved in Dane County Veteran Service Office here, and he just said, "Hey, look, man," he goes, "you can continue doing this and go down the rabbit hole, or you can, get your shit straight." So he was helping me do that. I finally went to the VA, and I ended up seeing a great counselor there for once a week for 2 years. I got really buried myself in veterans groups, including VFW, Military of the Purple Heart, but also outdoors veterans groups, Wounded Warriors in Action, just getting around the guys, getting the camaraderie, getting that shit out there. And it's come full circle now, which I'm so glad about, because through the VA, which I had a great VA experience here in Madison. I know you've been to the VA, you've been to one VA, but my experience was good, thank goodness. And I gradually was able to get the mechanisms, get the understanding, and put that kind of darkness into the advocacy and helping. Yeah. And now it's come full circle where I can go and lead these events and get guys out there that need help. And I've had more than a few say, "Look, man, you picked me up and you helped me get going." I said, "Well, that's because someone did it for me, 8 years ago." So it's a process. I mean, make no mistake, but it's also nothing for anybody to be ashamed of.
I think I think it's important to remember, I went through my own 47 weeks of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to deal with anger issues. And,
you bet I did. Yep, I did that.
And it's not a weakness. I'm glad you pointed out. It is not a weakness to get help. It can save your life.
Exactly. And, and it's not a weakness to have it, whether it's diagnosed PTS like we have, or whether it's moral injury, whatever it is, whether it's military sexual trauma, which, it's something that, I don't know, I'll use the word badge of honor, but you know what? You got it because you served your country.
It's a ribbon.
What's that?
It's a ribbon. It's some kind of ribbon
it's
for it.
It's a ribbon of some kind. You're right. And don't be too damn proud to say, "You know what? Yeah. And I'm going to go deal with it. And then I'm going to help others deal with it." Guys need to remember.
It is one of the most rewarding parts of my being a Gold Star dad is to have relationships with the soldiers that were with my son. And out of those 12 or 20 that knew him, I mean, I don't know of any of them, but that haven't had to call out for help. And they all came back. I mean, he was the only one. His mission he saw was to get everybody home, and everybody came home but him. But it isn't weakness. It is life.
Yeah.
It is what happens when you're willing to be in chaos. CENTCOM command chaplain said, "We have a military at war and a population at peace. And the population doesn't understand the significance of that difference. But what we've tried to do, what John's so good at, is to bridge that gap. That's the winning, when we bring vets into normalcy of some kind." And your story is really powerful, Jason. I mean, what a great acknowledgement of fact, not weakness or strength. It's just, it is what it is. You got to deal with it.
And he's done so well with it. I got to tell you this. Remember the bus ride we took? We were going fishing. My first time fishing for cold weather fish and northern fish. And they were giving out ribbons. Jason would definitely get one for cold weather fishing, because this guy knows everything about freaking fish. When it comes to the northern pike and It was crazy the way, and you ought to see how big his eyes get when he describes going fishing up there. It's different for me because I'm used to salt water, not in warm water, but not what you guys do. What was that like up there? That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It was, and it's weekends like that can just, it can change a life, and if not just that weekend, but it's a catalyst to get things going. And, I encourage guys and gals to get out there and to take advantage of these opportunities. There's so many great nonprofits out there that, whether it's a one weekend thing, whether it's a monthly thing, but the sooner you can fill that, the way I describe it is when we're in the military, when we're in uniform, we've got our brothers and sisters, we've got the camaraderie, we've got a purpose, right? I mean, there's the mission. Right. And a lot of that purpose is not only the mission, whether or not you agree with it, but, like you said, Chris, getting your people home, right? And when you get home and you're out of the uniform and you don't have that purpose, that's where a lot of guys are finding themselves going down the rabbit hole. And so, I encourage everyone to find that purpose, whether it's to, get into veterans advocacy or get into, making your voice heard in the legislature and the government, whether it's just being the guy who helps get people out in the fishing boat or out in the woods hunting or whatever it may be, or whether it's sailing or painting or whatever it's going to be, but find a purpose that gets you around other veterans. And it's not only healing for you in your own journey, but then you continue to heal as you're helping others on theirs. And it's something that more people need to take advantage of.
Yeah, that's great advice. So advocacy, you mentioned advocacy, and I know that I know that you're big time for that. And tell us what you do exactly when it comes to the legal circles. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I'd actually got involved in the legislative side of things first. Through my private career, I became a lobbyist and got involved with political consulting, did some campaigns, and that kind of got me on the radar with the governor here, and I ended up finding myself as deputy secretary for the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs back in 2011 and 12. And when I left the government, I got into the private sector again, but it's very financially, provides comfortably for my family, but I was missing something. And so then I, got working with the VFW and the MOPH, and I do all their legislative advocacy and lobbying pro bono. And then that got me on the national stage and doing legal work with the national MOPH and their judge advocate. But as I was out and about, as I was at the conventions, as I was at meetings, I was finding there was a huge frustration among our fellow vets as to the VA process for their appeals for disability. We've got great service officers. We've got the organizations have service officers, but they're good for the initial claim. They're good for the possible, appeal at the regional office. But once that goes up to the board in DC, it becomes a lot more convoluted, a lot more complex, but also it's such a weight, it's such a time commitment, and these service officers are stretched thin. So, there's attorneys around the country that are in the field. They represent the BVA level, and then with the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, which is where you go after the BVA. But many of them are not veterans. And, when I was talking with these guys, the fact that not only could they get an attorney who's a fellow combat veteran, but also someone who's been through the VA system, it really, popped at me as here's an opportunity to continue to serve, to get some satisfaction. And, and I don't make a lot of money at it. It was never my plan. It's not something, you're not going to find many attorneys that's all they do in their legal practice.
Right.
But that's not why I do it. It's doing it for a client I had last year who it took us 2.5 years, but he's a Korean War vet who finally got his benefits.
That's a great victory. Out.
And getting this lump sum that just changed his life for the remainder of it. It's getting the guys that come up to me on this, at a meeting or come to my office and say, hey, I need help with filing my appeal. And I say, well, you don't need me yet. There's no sense in you paying another attorney yet. here's the resources to go meet with your service officer and get going on it. And so just literally impacting one vet at a time. There's the grand scale of if I work on a piece of legislation in the Capitol and get it signed into law, yes, it's great for the veterans community. But to see and put a name and a face and impact someone's life directly in their civilian world and for their families.
That's awesome, man. Huge reward.
I get goosebumps talking about it.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal work that you're doing. And yeah, it does give you goosebumps. And you know what? To see you guys like you come back and give back like that, that's what it's all about, is giving back. I know you're a motorcycle rider, and
yes, sir.
What's the deal with that, man? I know you started something up there in Wisconsin with the Purple Heart guys. I know you I see your photographs all the time, man. What's that all about?
So, I've been riding, I grew up riding dirt bikes and everything else, and got my motorcycle license right after I got my driver's license. But it really wasn't until after I got home from Iraq. And as I mentioned, I was single. I met my wife about 6 months after I got home. But, got money in the bank. What's a good soldier do? He goes and blows it, right? So
yeah, that's the damn
I'm
truth.
a good single soldier. Anyway, I hope the ones with their families were taken care of.
I hear you.
But, I went and bought a welcome home to me present, bought my first Harley Davidson.
Awesome. Harley Davidson. There you go.
Yeah, buddy. You bet. I got a Road King Classic. And, that was a zen for me. I couldn't believe it. Getting out with whether it was one other buddy or a whole group. But, we go on tour around the country, different rallies. And it was a place where, whether you like it or not, or want it to or not, your mind is so focused that everything else just leaves. You get around other veterans and you're riding with them, your mind clears, you're at a peace, you're having conversations, and it's just something that really kind of started with things as well, and it's now a part of my soul.
I love that, man. Harley Davidson and Zen.
Yeah, buddy.
That's crazy, man.
There's a saying, 4 wheels move the body, 2 wheels move the soul. And it's something that I hope to continue to always do. But yeah, so I got...
Well, and there's the famous book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yes.
There you go.
Did you write that book?
So, I mean, it's one of those things I don't think is... the descriptions of what you get from riding was great. But, not all of us can, hop on the bike and disappear like that for that long. But I wish we could.
That's
but
true.
To truly develop into that,
if you were
my alter ego. What's that? Go ahead.
No, if you were old, I've told this to people and they said no, it can't be true, but it's true. When I was 14 and living in Colorado, they had a motorcycle license you could get. So I was literally riding a 2-wheeler 2 years before I could get a driver's license.
Oh.
And it taught me more about being a safe driver. And, when I sat for my driver's license and took it, the driver test guy at the motor vehicle got out and looked at my mom and says, "This is one of the best drivers I've ever been with. What did you do?" And he says, "Well, I rode a motorcycle for 2 years." And he goes, "Well, that'd do it." Because you do have a different perspective.
Do you have a biker's name? Do you have a biker name?
I do. It's JJ.
Nice.
JJ or the Bald Yeti.
I can see that, man. Doesn't give me goosebumps, but I can see it.
But good, to bring it back to your question, John, I had ridden out to DC for Rolling Thunder in 2015, and I was there at the parking lot, Pentagon.
Nice.
And was with some other friends, and the Purple Heart Riders Association rolls up. There's about 60 of them from all over the country. Saw their vest, right? It's obviously a big Purple Heart in the back, and it's Purple Heart Riders on it. And I immediately went over and started talking with them, and ended up meeting the national president from Vermont, who was also the founder. And he said, "Hey, look," he says, we don't have a chapter in Wisconsin yet. And, would you be interested in starting one? And I said, absolutely. So the moment I got back, started, drawing that up in the paperwork, get the Constitution going, recruiting the 5 needed people to start a chapter. And, it's a great organization. It's thankfully not very big, there's about 500 of us around the country. And here in Wisconsin, I found 4 other Iraq and/or Afghan vets who are Purple Heart recipients, and they've just got balls to the wall with it. We've decided to, any money we raise goes right into a cause. We don't even have a bank account because there's no point. We pay everything out of our own pocket as far as gas and anything else we do for events. And our main one right now that we've been raising money for is Hogs for Heroes of Wisconsin, which is a group here started in Madison, would have been 2 years ago. And it was actually done by non-veterans, a group. It was 2 brothers and their wives. And what they do is they raise 20 grand. And as soon as they raise the 20 grand, they put out the application process for a injured veteran, and they go and buy him a Harley Davidson, brand new.
That's awesome,
and,
man.
He goes and picks it out with them and everything else. And it's just such a great organization. And actually 2 of the guys who are officers in our Purple Heart Riders of Wisconsin received their bikes from that organization. And me, John, I got so involved with them that now I'm on their board. But
well, that's not a big surprise. Are you kidding me?
Full disclaimer there, yeah. But yeah, we actually did a ride down to Arkansas.
That's awesome.
In September to Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue, and we raised 12 grand before, during, towards the 20 grand. And we're continuing those fundraising efforts, and we're hoping that by September, because they do 2 presentations. Their goal when they started was to do 1 presentation a year. They're now doing 2 a year because the support has just been great. And our goal is to buy the September 2018 presentation fully from our chapter. So
what great work. Excellent, man. Creating balance in people's lives on 2 wheels. That's just pretty cool. I just know I'd seen all your pictures, and I knew you'd have a biker's name because I can see you in the black vest. Have you got a message about combat veterans for the non-veteran population here in the States or anywhere else for that matter?
We're the same people that you are, that we used to be. We're better. We're just better now. Don't look at what we went through and what we're going through as a weakness, as I've mentioned. Look at it as a character builder that's given us a perspective on life that many don't ever get or don't get until, they're much, much older. And so, it makes us better people in the community. It makes us better people overall. Don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry that happened to you," or, "Is there anything I can do to help you?" Just say, "Good for you, man. I'm here if you need anything."
Yeah. And then if you had the message, I know you talked about purpose, for your brothers and sisters coming back, taking the uniform off. Is there any more wisdom that you can give to those folks?
If we were at a bar belly up, I'd have all kinds of wisdom for you.
I always seem to have more wisdom every time I have a beer or 2. That's for sure. It's true,
right?
Man. We become Einsteins.
I guess what I would say to, the message I would put out is, well, don't be ashamed. Don't feel out of place. Also, at the same time, at the end of the spectrum, don't be a douchebag. Don't be out there saying, what about me? What about me? Look at me. It's something that to always be proud of. But do it in a way that you take your experiences, good and bad, and, help it build your character. Help it, show that they say that, less than 1% serve. Well, let's have that less than 1% be the ones that stand out in our communities and show them that exactly what our service means to us, and to honor those who didn't come back or those that, are still struggling.
Great advice and certainly some wisdom. And see, we even did it without a couple of beers. But, how can people get a hold of you if they're looking for help or need advice?
Absolutely. Get a hold of me on email, Jason, Jason, at NMLB, so November Mike Lima Bravo, vet.com. And that stands for No Man Left Behind Veterans Advocacy Group. So www.nmlbvet.com is the website, but Jason at nmlbvet.com is my email address. That's probably the easiest, best way to get a hold of me, and then we can chat. If you need any help, whether it's veterans advocacy, legal work in your appeals. If you just want to know, how do I get involved in some of these organizations you talked about? That's one awesome thing of, like I mentioned, in what I do is whether or not you end up need my help with appeals, I can help you get help you need in so many other areas as well. And something I'm so proud to do of. It's a duty I have.
And I know you do that because I didn't even know you from Adam. And when you found out that I was going to be up in Saskatchewan with the same group that you've been going up there with, you actually searched me out to call me to give me advice about similar things, getting into to Canada with some back history. And I'm saying this guy is really awesome to call me, doesn't know me, and to give me that advice. I got to tell you, Jason, it meant a lot. It really did. And that gives me goosebumps.
Thanks, brother. We got to take care of each other,
It's an honor to have spent time with you. I really appreciate your support. I know the connection between Gold Star families and vets and veteran aids is growing and getting better, but it's deep within our hearts.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris.
Well, thank you very much, Jason, for your time today. Thank you for your service to our great country. Looking forward to seeing you again, God willing, up there in Canada. And I don't know if I can handle a Harley, man. I'm getting kind of old, but if I get a chance, I won't dent it. I promise you. We
can get you a trike, John. Get you a trike.
I'd appreciate that, man. And do us a favor, tell us from the guys at Straight Outta Combat. Just we appreciate your wife as well, and congratulate you on your children. I know how you feel about her. I heard you talk about her, and God bless her too.
Absolutely, amen, brother.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. I keep saying another one, but it's true. There is a stand-up guy, serves his country, wounded in action, actually re-enlisted, pulled himself out of the civilian world as an attorney to serve his country because he was a witness to the Pentagon on fire during 9/11. It's guys like that I love talking to, and I know you do too, Chris. Those are the guys I want in my bunker.
And they are not without struggles. This isn't a gifted life. This is a life of purpose. You see these millennials that think everybody should do something for them and all that.
Don't get me going there.
Well, and then you see guys like Jason who simply want to serve and work. It's inspiring to me, and he's just so humble about it.
And what did he say? Something like, don't say, look at me. What do I get? He says, go out there and work for it.
Go just
make it happen.
Just spectacular.
It's good being here with you, Chris. Like always, I know we're making a difference. And I want to thank people for joining us once again on Straight Outta Combat. And I ask that everybody please stay tuned for the next proudly American, unapologetically patriotic, politically incorrect show. And remember,
freedom is not free. God bless you, John.
God bless you, Chris.
Save us all. Before they burn it down.